Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Beyond the Horizon, where we redefine reality. I am your host, Tabea Zoe, and today I am joined by a very special guest, a dear friend of mine, Nora Ring. She is a deep-rooted self-love coach, where she doesn't only guide women into the superficial self-love, but really goes into the depth with a lot of different tools like hypnosis and goes to the subconscious to anchor in this deep-rooted sense of self-love. And Nora is also a new mother. And today we want to redefine motherhood. She has a unique perspective on this topic as she has just become a mother, and she is someone who really does the work to break through limiting beliefs and who questions the way she is doing things and is an Aquarius who's always seeking a new way of doing things. You might have heard Nora and I talk before because she has been on the podcast for an episode where she shared her journey, her spirit baby journey, and her pregnancy journey. And that was an amazing episode and seems so long ago because her child is already 1 year old now. So it is like 1.5 years ago that we talked, and you can go back and listen to that episode as well because it was such a great episode. And Nora has her own podcast, the Deep Rooted Self-Love podcast, in which she shares so vulnerably. And I mean, she's a very close friend of mine. And when I listen to her podcast, it feels like I'm listening to a voice note where she shares her insights, what is alive for her, and then takes it and really gives you guidance to look at these themes and topics for yourself and anchor even deeper into self-love. Without further ado, here comes a conversation on redefining motherhood for a new paradigm with Nora Ring. Enjoy! Welcome, Nora, to the podcast.
Hello.
Before we get into the topic of today, I want to ask you 3 questions.
Oh, okay.
So
You didn't tell me about those.
No. Jump scare. So I will say all 3 and then you can start. So the first question for you is, how do you perceive the shift in our collective consciousness? How do you perceive where we are headed? Or what do you see personally where we are headed, all of us? And what do you want our future to be?
Okay. Big questions.
Yeah.
I feel like, I probably have to think about it much longer to give you like a whole answer of how I, see it in the grand picture. But okay, the first question is how I see our collective changing right now, or can you
Yeah.
repeat the question one more time? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you perceive the shift in our collective consciousness? So the change that is happening right now. And I mean,
Mm,
of course, we are speaking from our personal experience. You are speaking from what you see, what
yeah.
you perceive. There are a lot of other things going on as well. But what do you see? What is changing right now?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is because I first had the exact thought that you were saying, right? I can only speak for myself, but I'm noticing that, okay, so speaking for myself and then how I think it relates to the collective is I notice with myself, like everything becomes a bit more soft, a bit more feminine, a bit more, okay, how does work-life balance actually look in my life? How does and not just work life, right? Motherhood, work and private life. And I feel like for me, there's a lot of shifts happening with just allowing myself to rest more, allowing myself to follow my real unique essence, my real unique excitements, etc. And but I can't necessarily say that that's for everyone. I know that that's for a lot of people, but I feel like other people are going actually exactly in the opposite direction and they're really
Yeah.
feeling the negative effect of it, which might mean that eventually we're all gonna, live in this more softer era. But I know like friends from, when I was younger, or just even just in general, people that are not necessarily in my direct group of friends or even clients, they actually oftentimes go the opposite way where they're burning out, they're just living for that um what this word in English, I always forget it, Bestätigung, validation. They
Yeah.
always they're living for this very strong external validation, and they're feeling though that it's not really giving them what they expect from it. And I think that's my feeling, but I of course I can't see into the future, but my feeling is that many people are shifting more into this, yeah, like analog life as well, right? Like we're doing gardening a lot of the time right now. My husband's out
Yeah.
right now and just doing with like, I don't know, I think our neighbor, he's like 60, then a friend of our neighbor who's 80, who's been gardening his entire life, and then his grandson, and they're all just gardening outside and making the vegetable
So
patch.
nice.
And I feel like a lot of people are shifting in that direction, this more connected to the earth, connected to the ground, connected to the cyclical living. But
Mm.
we'll see where that's going to go. And then what's the
Yeah.
second question?
It was, how do you perceive where we are headed? So what do you feel is the future that we are heading into?
I guess I
You
covered that
already said
a
that a little
little
bit,
bit,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
So maybe you want to continue on with what do you want a future to be?
what I want our future to be. Honestly, I think I want when I think about the question, I'm much less focused on like, oh, this is the picture in my head of how I
Hmm.
want things, how I want people to work, etc., how I want people to live, of more of this. It's almost like when I ask people, what do you do for work? And they tell me whatever they do. I don't even care what they do. And then I ask them, okay, and do you enjoy it? And if they say to me, yeah, I really enjoy it, it really lights me up, like that's great. And I think that's what I'm hoping we're, and I'm speaking a lot about work because I guess it does take up a lot of space in people's life.
Yeah.
But your work can be being a mother, right? Your work can be
Mm.
anything, really. I think work is really just what you give back to the community in a lot of ways to other people. And yeah, I really hope it's going to go in the way where we can really just follow our true excitement. And I heard this in a podcast episode and I wrote it down actually somewhere of like, can your desires be your roadmap? Can you trust that your
Mm.
desires can be your roadmap? And I feel like I hope that we're going to go this way and that people on the way there are able to just let go of all the fears that keep them small and keep them in golden cages that destroy them from the inside, to say it in a really extreme way. Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are the first things that come to my mind. If you give me a day to think about it, I can probably give you a much
Yeah, but
broader
that's why I
answer.
wanted to bring them out like a jump scare so you can only answer what is coming right up.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's so interesting that you're saying, yeah, it's like people go into one direction and then there are people going into the opposite direction. And I feel that as well. I felt that like in the beginning of the year, this one wave of people going into this hustle and bustle and let's go and let's start this year and get ahead and stuff like that. And then
Mm,
other people like, we are not even at the real beginning of the new year. We are in the middle of winter. Let's slow down. So like really
mm,
extreme ways. But that also a lot of people said, I had a really exhausting and challenging start to the year, 2 weeks in, because
mm,
this hustle did not work, because this, okay,
mm.
let's go for it did not work. And yeah, I think that's kind of how we often move in this pendulum swinging into extremes, and then we find our way into
Yeah.
what really is aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really this cyclical living, right? This like accepting
Mm.
that winters are just part of your life. And
Yeah.
I like to give the example with like you don't expect to like get strawberries in the middle of winter. Like there's no expectation for that. So why do we have the expectation for us to always be bringing out fruit and labor in a way?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that was a beautiful intro into the topic of redefining reality, looking at where are we headed, what do we want to do, and what do we want to create. And it's kind of like this both directions, going for individual reality and manifesting the reality that we desire, and still at the same time influencing the people around us and the collective all at once. And I want to start with something that I actually wrote down from a voice note that you sent me. Another jump scare.
was gonna say the cheekiness in your face.
And I think it's a great starting point for people who don't know you. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
Mhm.
But what you told me is that I am not losing myself in being a mother, but I am finding myself. I am healing my own inner child as I am the mother I wanted to have. I am nurturing myself as I nurture my son. It really hits my heart even saying that out loud. It's like, oh, so wise and like such a beautiful perspective on motherhood in general. So I wanted to start off with that, with the thing of losing yourself or finding yourself as a mother. What has been your experience as a new mother?
Oh, yeah, it's I feel like everything self-love and motherhood is just such a complex topic. I feel like after starting my self-love journey probably 10 years ago now, I feel like becoming a mom has been a whole new set of learnings. Um, and let me think about it for a moment. So I feel like having my son, there's been so many things of like the sleep deprivation and all
Mm,
these different things where you need to learn to set boundaries, but also where you need to I just kind of believe that I'm just here for him to guide him on this journey, and I'm here to hold his space and be there for his emotions and all these things. And um I definitely feel like my mother was a very different kind of mother to me, and I wonder if that's oftentimes the case that we kind of want to give our children what we didn't get in a way. For example, I went to daycare when I was, I think, 8 months already, things like that. And I wasn't planned as a baby, so there was definitely this, there wasn't necessarily the and I think it's not the case for everyone who has a baby that's not planned. But I think in my case, there was this way of like, I kind of just had to fit in. I kind of just had to tag along what the life of my parents were bringing up. And my mom wanted to go back to studying her law and so on and so forth. And I feel like I'm doing a lot of things in another way. Like I even had a moment where my mom, like we're always sending videos of our son into this family group. And my mom said to me, like, wow, like I had this moment where I realized like how present you are with him, like how much you notice him and
mm,
how much you just like appreciate him in his being. And she's going through her own journey and everything, but like she really like she said it in a way that was like, yeah, that we probably weren't able to give you that in the same way.
mm,
And I think that's what is really beautiful about motherhood. But I do also think you need to be careful to not get caught up in your own inner child and not to overgive in the other direction, which is I think where I can find myself
mm.
in sometimes. I mean, you've witnessed our whole night weaning and not night weaning journey and
Yeah.
everything. And um I think
But
I'm
maybe you can explain that a little bit further for people who don't immediately get it. What does it mean to get kind of stuck in your own inner child as you are nurturing a child? What do you
yeah.
mean by that? When you say getting hooked into the inner child as you are nurturing your own child, what comes up for me is kind of like overgiving from a place where you are hurt and then using your own wound or using the experience of nurturing a child to heal your own
Yeah.
wound, even though maybe your child doesn't need the exact same thing or
Exactly. I think
yeah.
this is really it, is like being like, okay, my inner child didn't get like the full attention that it maybe needed or wanted, and
Mm,
then kind of over giving that sometimes to your child to the extent of your own well-being, for example. Or but what I even mean more, so for example, I feel like I'm like my son's main focus. Like he wants to be on me
mhm,
most of the time when he's crying. He wants my nurturing and everything. And even though it's sometimes exhausting for me because I can't give it up to Nico, there's also a part of me that wants that and wants to be his main connection point. And I still haven't 100% figured it out. I'm something that I'm speaking with my hypnotherapist about in my next session.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like there's something of my own hurt inner child that really wants to be that only person for him, and where I
Mm,
could actually benefit from just letting go a little bit and being like, he's okay with his father. He's okay with his father if I let him. Do you know a little
yeah.
bit what I'm going
Yeah.
for? And also I had another really interesting session that I did a whole podcast episode about this on victim mentality of like I had this thing after my son's birth that I felt really, really guilty for
Mm,
how he came into the world, that he had to come with a C-section instead of vaginally. And it was really upsetting for me. Like, I always felt like this pity for him, like, oh, this poor child, like, he had to come 3 weeks early and all these things, even though he was completely healthy and was like a completely happy baby and everything. And then I had a hypnotherapy session about it because I was like, there's something more to it. And we speak about this all the time, right? And when something is really triggering, it's oftentimes because it's like, or if it's hysterical, it's historical. And I
yeah.
notice these things, I think because I've done so much work on myself and with my clients, I think I can feel into sometimes like, okay, this is not just like my intuition speaking. This is coming out of fear. This is coming out of a hurt
Yeah.
place. Mm. And I did a hypnotherapy session on it. I was like, I just don't want to feel so guilty anymore. I know consciously it doesn't really make sense. And it came back that in the end, it was me projecting, and I'm going to make this short because it's a complex
Yeah.
story, but it was me projecting my father died when I was 8, and I always felt sorry for him for a really long time.
Yeah.
Whenever I felt connected to those hurt feelings about him dying, I felt sorry for him. Poor him, he died. Poor him, he had to leave his family behind. Like, it must have been so hard for him. And in the hypnosis, the hypnotherapist was able to connect it back to my emotions, which were actually the one I was feeling sorry for, and not my dad,
Yeah.
not my son. It was me who
Yeah.
needed to grieve that I lost my father. I needed to feel the anger and so on and so forth. And since that session, I haven't felt guilty about the way he came into the world, you know? And I think that's maybe probably one experience that I've already worked through that I
Yeah.
can explain of how you can have your own inner child getting in the way. You know, my son doesn't need my pity. It doesn't help him if I feel pitiful or if I feel sorry for him. He just wants me to be happy that he's here, celebrate his birth, celebrate that he's here. Of course, make space for his feelings, but I'm not ultimately making room for his feeling in a situation like that, but for my own feelings that I never felt, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe
And I
that's
think,
an example.
yeah, and I think it's like you dove right into the topic of how, you are so aware and you are so conscious of your own patterns. And I feel like we are all in a generation of people who really want to heal and relearn and deprogram and really do things differently. And we are still on the journey. So, when we think about even your parents and your mother saying, I'm noticing how present you are. I know that we didn't give you that. The generation of our parents didn't have all of the tools, and it wasn't just the culture
Mm.
to go to therapy or have a hypno coach who like does this
Mm.
work for you, and there wasn't this awareness that there is now for all of these patterns. And when we go back even further to our grandparents, they had even less space and time to think about these things. Not only that they not have the tools or the awareness, but really most of them were in survival mode just in the time and history. So
Mm.
I feel like it's so interesting what you are pointing out, because I feel like it's like this time right now where we are going through, like, culturally, that we want to do things right and be conscious and so on, but it's also tricky to like do the right thing all the time or be the conscious person all of the time, because
Mm.
as you are parenting, you are also healing, and things from yourself or like from your past are coming up as well. And
Mm.
not only just from you, but like even from like your childhood and your parents and so on. Like it goes back
Mm.
like into the past for such a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think about this all the time, the privilege that we have now to look inward and to the higher realms and everything. When I think of my grandparents or even further, they grew up in war, right? There was
Mm.
none of that. And I knock on wood. I hope that throughout our lifetimes, throughout the lifetimes of our children, we're going to keep living in that kind of security because, again, I know that there's a lot of people in the world who aren't, and they're probably not doing the work that we're doing right now. So I think
Yeah.
that's also something to remember that it's like such a privilege to have this freedom and to just, yeah, see where that's going to take us and how much impact it can have.
Yeah. And when you look at, okay, besides like taking your triggers on for yourself and working through your things so you don't project them onto your son, what else are things where you feel like this is like a new way of doing things, or what is important for you to do with your parenting style or with your child? What values do you hold as a mother?
I feel like one of the main ones is just making space for his feelings and
Mm,
making room for his feelings. Because I think that's something that I see with almost all my clients that I've ever worked with, them being so disconnected to their emotions because they never had family that could hold their emotions and that could make space for their emotions, and not just the happy ones, but also the angry ones, also the sad ones.
mm,
And I think that's actually my most important value in parenting. And especially here in the UK, it's interesting. A lot of people, when a baby cries, they'll be like, "Oh, you're okay. You're okay."
yeah.
And I almost want to slap them in the face when they do that because I've heard it so many times. And it's like, and I will say, like, but it's also okay for him to feel sad when he hits his head on
Mm,
something, you know, or
yeah.
feel upset. And they don't mean it in a bad way. It's not, I've seen it in both ways. I've seen it in the way where someone like literally says it to like kind of shut up their child. But I see it
Mm,
more often in the way where they want to care for them and they want them to feel okay again. Um,
mm,
but what it really oftentimes is the parent not being able to feel okay when the child is hurting. And I even remember this
yeah.
from me as a child. And I think you gave me a similar example once from your family. My mom, I remember I told her one time someone made a mean comment about how I looked when I was a teenager, and I shared that with her, and she got so upset because she cares about me, but she made it so much worse.
Yeah.
And I think there's really this like middle ground of you shouldn't suppress your children's feelings, but you should also not make it your own experience. I
Mm,
believe you have to be there to hold space for them, to come along with their feelings and explain their feelings to them, if they're not old enough to explain them to themselves or understand them themselves, but you shouldn't get sucked into it. It's like it's almost like when you're coaching, right? Like you can hold them the hand to get them out of the river, but you shouldn't get into the river yourself because then you're both screwed.
yeah.
And and I say
Yeah.
this, and I know how hard this is sometimes. I know especially
Mm,
when my son cries because he wants the boob at night, and I set the boundary to not give it to him in the night, and I see his hurt face. There's something in me
mm,
that is breaking. It's so difficult, but it's not helping if I end up, looking at him like, "Oh, you poor thing."
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean it, you cannot hold space if you are not regulated yourself. So it
yeah.
really comes back to first taking care of your own emotions or being able to handle your own emotions so you have the capacity to hold someone else in
Yeah.
their emotional process.
Yeah, and also be in touch with your own emotions in front of them. I think that's an
Yeah.
important one as well. You can always tell your children it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel angry, but if you suppress your own emotions throughout the whole
Yeah.
day, like you can read them all those great books about feelings and all, but if they never see you get angry, if they never see you get sad, if they never see you speak about the hard parts of your day, again, not to have them consult you or, to hold your
Yeah.
emotions, but to share your emotions in a natural way that ups and downs are part of life. They're not dysregulating you completely, but they're just part of life, and giving them
Mm.
with that also the opportunity to know that it's fine to feel whatever they're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what you said, yeah, that I also told the story in my childhood. My mother also just wasn't able to handle my anger. I was a very angry child. And I mean, now
Mm.
thinking back, I'm thinking like, how angry was I really? Because maybe it's also her perception that she didn't allow herself to be angry. And then when I was
Mm.
angry, it was like she couldn't handle it. And she told me, and I think she she really meant it in a helpful way, but in my child brain it just did not land the way that she intended to. So she said that I when the anger comes, I should not let it overwhelm me, but I should hold it. And when you are an adult, I mean, now I can really say, like, yeah, I am the vessel for my emotions. I can let them arise and let them flow through, and I can hold myself as these emotions rush in. But as a child, you don't get that, I didn't get that concept. So for
Mm.
me, what I thought it would mean is I need to hold in the anger. I should keep it to myself. I'm not allowed to express it and share it because I am not allowed to be overwhelmed by anger. So in my teenage years, I noticed how much anger I held inside. And even when people were abusive, I did not get angry because I wasn't allowed to be angry. So it was like all stuffed inside. And it took me a long time to kind of get out of that and release a lot of anger and find different ways to work with anger. So it's something that I really had to learn so late in my life. What I think usually you learn as a child to handle like all emotions in a way. So
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a really great book. It's called Rest, Play, Grow, and she really explains
Mm.
how the child's brain is just not developed yet to be able to
Yeah.
regulate himself, herself yet. And I think that's just such an important thing. And she really talks about how in past generations, you would give them a time out, or you would kind of punish them for having emotions, for being angry and everything. And it works, quote unquote works. Like you see the child doesn't have
Mm.
these strong emotions anymore because they start having shame about the emotions
Yeah.
that they have, when really we all have all emotions in ourselves. And that's really why so many people are so disconnected to their emotions and their
Yeah.
anger, their hurt, and it's just so part of it. And you need your emotional compass in order to know what's good and what's not good, to know when you need to set boundaries, like even what you were saying as a teenager. And same with me, when I look at my dating experiences as a teenager, I probably would have loved to have a parent that would have just been there and be like, what are you feeling? Check in with your
Yeah.
body. Where are you feeling this tension in your body? Where are you feeling expansion? What do you think is this connected to? When do you feel like this and when do you don't feel like this? And really connecting your body's compass to your life,
Mm.
and making your conclusions from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you also said with the shame, that's what we work through later on in personal development when we work through our shadow. It's all the shame that we have learned. And I think that's also so interesting, like the perspective that you have as a mother and a coach, a self-love
Mm.
coach, that you work with clients on their inner child and you work through all of the shame, and at the same time you have a child where okay, these are the formative years that later on people come to me with their problems because something happened to them in their childhood. That's why their inner child is still active. So um, I mean, how do you feel about those two experiences coming together right now for you?
It's a tough one because on one hand it gives me a lot of information and it gives me a lot of, okay, this is what my child needs, and at the same time it puts a lot of pressure on me.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
this is something that my hypnotherapy trainer said to me once. Like he was like, it's not that your the parents did something wrong necessarily. It's also things that we just perceive in black and white as children, right? And like there is certain things, and I've gotten much better about it, but I noticed that I will want to control the experiences that my child has. I want him
Mm.
to only have positive experience where he's only has his emotions validated, where there's only happy family around him. And but there are certain things, like for example, my dad dying, that's nothing that anyone did on purpose. It's nothing that
Yeah.
anyone could have really done differently. That's just some things that happen in life, and they're going to shape you no matter how good a parent you are. So I think that is a big part of like just kind
Yeah.
of realizing that there are certain things in life that are just going to happen, and there is certain things that you don't have control over. And at the same time, of course, also just being like, okay, like I need to help my child feel his emotions. I need to help him feel connected
Mm.
to himself. I'm honestly thinking more and more even about homeschooling our child one day because it's much more
Mm.
common here in the UK. I'm not 100% sure about it. I think Nico is much more fond of it than I am, but I am thinking about it more and more of thinking how many years I've wasted in school of doing things every day that didn't light me up, that weren't matching any of the jobs that I can do today anyway.
Yeah.
But I think there's pros and cons to it. But for example, one story that I had was a client of mine who's really struggles with feeling very pressured to perform and work and to over like work past her limits and things like that. And we went through a hypnosis together, an inner child hypnosis, where she came back to a moment where both of her parents were self-employed and they were working from home. They had like a shop or something. And her whole family was always very busy with that shop. And I'm not sure how good it was always going. I think maybe it was stressful sometimes. And we came back to a moment where she was in like a little, like these baby gate cages.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like behind the counter and she just didn't feel seen. And that's where she learned that she needs to do things and perform in order to get love and attention. And I'm self-employed. My husband and I work from home. I started working 15 hours a week again, in which time Nico watches him and stuff. But there's moments where I'm like, oh my God, am I damaging him right now? Like, should I just be present with him? Should I just not work at all? So yeah, but I can't give you an answer to that. So what's the right thing to
Yeah.
do? I'm still figuring it out myself.
Yeah,
I
of
do
course.
Because I
Eh,
do think it's so important that you're happy as a parent as well. I think that's
Yeah.
the most important thing next to validating their emotions is just being happy yourself. If you're not enjoying just being at home, maybe your husband is away a lot, you feel lonely, like I highly recommend working on being happy again within yourself because that's what
Mm.
rubs off to your kids.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great story because the pressure to perform is something that is very much in our culture right now. And even if we try to shape our reality differently, or we try to work through it for ourselves and get out of that paradigm, still just this single moment. And I mean, I think then later on, most likely it has been reinforced throughout our culture that she thinks she needs to perform to be seen. But just this moment of just where she was in the room behind the counter, she was not seen. It wasn't even that, ignored her and had any bad will or anything, but just
Mm.
these moments shape us. And I
Yeah.
think it's always both. It's not either or, and you can never do it perfectly. We are shaped by the culture, and we can still also shape the culture ourselves. We can, you know, work through these things, but then things happen, or there are just influences beyond our control,
Mhm.
and we cannot be aware of everything. And that's not the meaning of life, to make everything aware, or to just always do the right thing, because that does not exist. It is much more
Mm.
like what my intention is really to find a way to become aware of things and consciously create them, and at the same time to allow life to just unfold and
Mhm.
to move with life as it comes, and to just take things as they are and to meet reality where it is in every single
Mm.
moment, and not just like try to fix something all of the time, because I feel like this is where we can get hooked a lot with all self-development, that we try to fix something, the past or our behavior and so on, without living life. And it's part
Yeah.
of life that things happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I also think still, nevertheless, I think us humans are oftentimes more resilient than we think we are. I mean, again, I was
Yeah.
in Kita at 8 months.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know a lot of other kids as well, and they're probably going to turn out fine. And also that's why we have the tools that you and I are using with our clients because they're working and they're amazing.
Mm.
And that's again where I think it's so important to kind of take your own heart out of things sometimes and be careful that you're not projecting your pain onto your children and to seeing what do they need in the moment. I'll give you another example. My husband still remembers having to go to a nursery or to whatever, something that you have at 3 years old. And he would cry and cry, and he would not understand why he has to be there when he just could be with his mom. And he's
Mm.
still so traumatized from that, literally, that I think when the time comes when our son has to go not has to, but we want him to go to nursery, it's going to be harder for him than for our son. And I think, again, there, important to see, like, from which pain are we going out from? Is this
Yeah.
because, like, is this really because our son at 2.5 can't be 3 hours in a nursery, or is this because my husband's inner child still
Yeah.
feels like it needs to make up for that time and stuff? And that's why I think it's just so important to just also see how your children are doing and how they're reacting to things. But I mean, this is just like a random thought. And again, like all of this, I've only been a mother for 15 months now, and maybe I will never say I figured it out entirely, which I think is also a good way to approach things. But I do sometimes have moments because I started working 15 hours a week this year. And since then, I noticed that my son wants to be on me all the time when we're together. Like he doesn't even want to sit on Nico's lap at the kitchen table. We'll like maybe be like a couple of seconds and then he'll want to be back on
Mm.
me. And I did have this moment this morning where I was like, is this just a sign that I just shouldn't work? Is this a sign that I should just only be with him and only give him that? And then yeah, I do wonder sometimes. I cannot tell you for sure, but I do sometimes wonder, like, I think people in the very, very past, when people were living in villages still, they still had some things right, know, of
Yeah.
like the women being able to just spend as much time as they want with the children and taking them along and having them in the village, having aunties, uncles to support them and all that stuff. Um, yeah, I sometimes wonder if that was actually a life that maybe made a lot of people more happy, and if it's just like the expectations of society and this like Leistungsdruckgesellschaft that
Yeah.
is pushing us in another direction. And I say that though as a mom that also I love doing this podcast right now. I couldn't do this podcast if I didn't have my work hours, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's I find it such a tough thing to figure out, but I am just so grateful that I have the freedom to do these things while my husband watches our son, and to have the flexibility to say potentially next month, okay, no, I'm not working 15 hours a week. I'm gonna work 5 hours a week. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to, okay, maybe they were right in the past, and now our culture is at a place with a lot of pressure. What are the societal and cultural pressures that you feel now as a mother, maybe that you didn't expect before you got pregnant, or things that
Mhm.
you already felt when you got pregnant, that this would be a thing that would be even more like feel even stronger, be even more of a pressure, more of an expectation when you become a mother? What are some things that come to mind there?
I think in general, motherhood is just not valued as much as I think it should be
Mm.
valued.
Yeah.
We talked about this before, but literally every person that's around us has come from the womb of a woman, and still our
Yes.
society is still not helping to make the structures to for women to keep having babies. There's people who don't have
Yeah.
babies because they just say they don't want to have children in the way that our society works. I once read in a book that we all need to, in order for our society to keep growing and in order for our society to keep the same, that in order for our society to basically not die out, each woman
Hmm.
needs to have two children in their life on average.
Yeah.
Um, because one for the male and one for the female that needs
Hmm.
to keep on going and to survive. Otherwise, we're going to die out. And that is just
Yeah.
like such a, I feel like that's like a pretty crazy realization. And still, it's not valued. I think there's definitely a lot of pressure of like, when are you going back to work? So that is along those lines. And I know it goes both ways. So I spoke when I was pregnant, I was at a yoga retreat and I spoke to someone who wanted to, how was it, who wanted to go back to work. And she felt a lot of pressure of you have to stay at home with your children. You have to be at home for the first 3 years, otherwise you're a bad mom. So there's
Mm.
that
Yeah.
pressure. And
Yeah.
then at the same time, though, when you don't want to go back to work and you decide I'm gonna dedicate those years to my children, people are like, "Oh, she's losing herself in motherhood. She's just
Mm.
sacrificing herself for her children. She's gonna be a shell of herself." And both of them are so unfair. And that brings me back to what I said in the beginning. I think anyone should, in a perfect world, have the freedom to do what feels authentically good to them and what feels aligned with what they want to do. And I feel like I'm definitely more on the second line where if I had to choose, go back to work 40 hours a week or even 20 hours a week, go somewhere else to
Yeah.
work. Or stay at home entirely with my child and maybe, I don't know, have hobbies while he naps, I would definitely choose the second one if I was financially
Mm.
fine. Um,
Yeah.
and so for me, the struggle has been more allowing myself that and giving myself permission to follow that and not to do the opposite. Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
that's some of the pressure that I feel. And then there's just a lot of people, there's also this thing that a lot of people say to us. It's like, oh, he's so well behaved. Something else that a lot of people here in
Mm.
England say that, oh, he's such a well behaved child. And I'm always like, what do you mean by well behaved? It's not that we train
Yeah.
him like a dog to behave. You know, um, he's
Yeah.
what they mean by well behaved is that he's happy and that he's not crying a lot when they're around or whatever. Which again is just this messed up societal expectation that you're supposed to be happy all the time, and then people are depressed because they aren't happy, and instead of feeling their sad feelings, they disconnect from their feelings entirely. Um, yeah,
Yeah. And
and
I
I think
feel like the being well behaved is also to be obedient, to listen to the parents. And so often that is overwriting that emotional compass that you were talking about earlier.
Mm,
When you are obedient, you ignore your own, as a child, I mean, you learn to ignore your own emotions in order to fit into the rules. And
yeah.
yeah, that leads nowhere.
Yeah, and then it bursts out, right? Like my husband had the
Yeah.
same thing as you, that he was a very angry child and he was never allowed to feel
Mm.
angry. I mean, his dad still to this day, when he says something like, "Oh, I feel like," and then mentions like a sad, like a, yeah, negative emotion, his dad will be like, "Oh, don't feel that." You know?
Yeah.
And because now he has the awareness, he'll be like, "Yes, I am feeling that. I can't just stop
Yeah.
feeling it just because you tell me to, just because it makes you
Yeah.
uncomfortable."
Yeah.
Or like Nico's aunt house got robbed, unfortunately, and like a lot of her,
Mm.
like a lot of sentimental stuff got stolen, and we were all at
Oh
we all
no.
had his house, at her house, and we asked her about it, and you could really tell she liked to share about it and things like that. I can make a note on that afterwards as well, what makes her special as a person. But and Nico's father was like, "Yeah, I tend to not ask about it because it tends to make her sad." And
Mm. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Nico and I, and it's just so interesting because he means well, But
Yes.
what it
Yeah.
really is like it makes me uncomfortable when she is sad. So I'm not gonna ask her
Yeah.
about her sad feelings. And I think that's what a lot of parents have with their children. And what I wanted to say about
Yeah.
her, though, even though she comes from that generation that still, doesn't make space for feelings, is very disconnected from sad feelings. I've had my grandparents say, "Ah, let's not talk about such
Yeah.
depressing things." Like that's like the typical thing of that generation. Let's not talk about such stuff because it's just gonna make us sad. And but she had so many losses in her life, like so many,
Mm.
really just so many close people in her life, family members die. And I think ultimately it actually made her, like, she didn't have any other choice but to connect to her feelings. That's
Yeah.
how I kind of see it a little bit, which is why I think
Mm.
for her age, for being in her 70s, she's quite connected to to her
Yeah.
emotions and these things, because she kind of had to do that in life.
Yeah. And I mean, everything that you are saying is coming back to this making space for emotions, listening to your own inner compass, and also like differentiating what is yours and what is from someone else.
Mhm.
And one other thing I feel like is something, I mean, I think like the generation of our parents maybe wasn't thinking that way anymore as much, but before that, there was really this concept of a child is like a blank page, and you, with education and so on, you form the child. I mean, there are so many different ways of looking at education, but that's still a philosophy that is discussed, like this: we are forming our children, and education is supposed to form our children into something. And yeah, I am wondering what you think about this, like a child coming in as a blank page, forming a child, and how that relates to like authenticity.
Yeah. So I always say, like, our son is a mix of Nico, of me, and just something that he brought with himself. Like he's
Yeah.
just some universal thing of, yeah, his soul's essence, I think. And
Mm.
Um, I, because of the work that I do, not necessarily when it comes to education, but I do think there's a lot of nurturing that is happening. And I think
Mhm.
that's why I try to not judge people for certain behaviors, even parenting that I don't like. That's how they were raised, right? And that's people, when I say, oh, people aren't making space for emotions, they never had someone make space for their own emotions. So I think there is a big
Yeah.
part of that in there, that if depending on how you raise your child, depending on how you mentor them through life, or depending on how you hold them through life, it does shape them, I think. But at the same time, I do think every child comes with his own soul essence. And especially when it comes to education, what you were referring to, right, is probably this thing of like, how can you make them into a smart, into an eloquent, into whatsoever kind of human? And I think
Yeah.
that's where the school system goes so wrong. And I mean, so many people have critiqued the school systems in the way that you kind of have to be good at everything. And we all know that, so someone can praise you or can compliment you, and then say one negative thing. The negative thing is going to be the thing that
Mm.
sticks. And if
Yeah.
you're good in school at, I don't know, 6 subjects, but then two you're really bad at, those two are the ones that stick. And those two are the ones that are going to make you feel like, oh, I can't accomplish things in the world. I'm not good as a human. I'm not worthy enough. And I think that's where I don't believe you can shape people just through education, because otherwise we'd all be the same when we come out of school, which we aren't, right?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's the beautiful honor of being a parent, is helping your children see what they are. I don't even want to say good at, but what lights them up, and encouraging them to follow that,
Mm. Yeah.
and to help them feel empowered about the things that they aren't naturally good at, and allowing them to either follow that and get better at if they want to, and if it still excites them, right? Because you can be like not great at something because you just started it, but it still excites you, so you can encourage a child to keep on going. But then there are certain things that us humans just feel like they need to do because you need to be good at it, not because it's fun or because it
Mm,
lights you up. And then I feel like allowing children and yourself to let those things go as well.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you already mentioned that you feel like that society right now doesn't really value mothers and that it's kind of ignored that everyone comes from a mother. So let's do like a little bit of a thought experiment. What would a society look like that really valued women as mothers?
Oh God, you're asking me all these big questions that I've never actually
Yes.
thought about. Uh, um, oh, that's a good question. So first of all, it would allow mothers to be with their children for as long as they feel is right. It wouldn't push people to go back to work and make money, but support them in having children. And
Mm,
having like the state support, even in Germany, you have like 1 year of state support, and after that it's over, or you spread it over 2 years. I think in England, I'm not even sure if you have that at all. Um, Well, I honestly, Zoe, I this is a very complex question. I have to think of because it's like so political. I feel like a lot of the first things that I think about is really like politically, like how can you support
mhm.
women? Because a lot of it is financially. I know a lot of people who would prefer to stay home, but they just can't because they have to go back to work. Um, I think it also is in a society where self-employment is more supported and easier because I know that that is something that is easier for me and for a lot of women who have to go back to work. I remember working in advertisement for a while, and I there was this one woman who would had 3 children, and every time she had a kid, she would be out of work for a year, come back
Mm,
and completely be put in a new department and then build up that department, go back, go away, have a child and come back and just work on another department. Like she's just something exchangeable that's like, yeah, can be take honestly taking advantage of a little bit and then tossed again and put on something else as if she has no connection to the work and the people that she works with.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts? Let's brainstorm together because I think I'm going to come up with more things if you have some ideas as well.
Yeah, I mean, I also haven't thought it through before, but I feel like, it just came to mind because one thing that I really see is that mothers are the leaders of the next generation. Mothers bring up those that will carry on our culture, our society, and they are forming, mothers are forming the children, and as we said, like their future inner child, basically their future subconscious, which plays an enormous role in how we act every single day as
Mm,
humans. And I think one thing is like protecting that time for mothers and for children so that, from the inside out, from the like subconscious programming out into how we act in the world, everything can happen from love. And of course, when we look at it like in our society, in our culture, it becomes political and it becomes very practical. But I think that we kind of also need to break out of even thinking that way, because when we start to look at all of these things that don't function, we are still perceiving it from the structure of our reality right now that does not allow that spaciousness. So I think when we come from a different perspective of, okay, what are the thoughts that would create a different reality, we can also come up with such a different political like structure or cultural structure that would be supportive, that we can now, it's difficult to think about, okay, what would that mean financially, because we are in that situation where it's difficult for women to decide without looking at finances. But if we really would want to change things, I think we need to get to something different, to like the way
mm,
we are thinking about things. That is what needs to change. And I
mm,
feel like it's already changing in just a conversation already, like listening to your own emotions, having an internal compass, looking at, okay, how am I shaping my child and what is the essence of my child and so on. That's already like such a different way of looking at motherhood than the past generations.
Mm.
So I think we are already on that trajectory into something else. I see that I mean that's the like the whole topic. I feel like it's like we are already shifting in the way that we are thinking, but still we are within a culture that does not allow really us to live by that new way of thinking and being, you know?
Yeah, and I mean this goes even further, right? There's probably a lot of people that don't want us to live in our true essence. I don't know if
Yeah.
this is a fact, but I was told that apparently with LSD, it used to be legal, and then everyone that was taking LSD just didn't want to do work in factories anymore, didn't want to go to
Mm.
war anymore. I think that was the thing.
Yeah.
Like, and so it was made illegal because you needed people to conquer territories and things like that. I think that it's
Yeah.
like it goes much higher and more
Yeah.
structural
Yeah.
than we can even perceive probably. And because I was also
Yeah.
thinking while you were saying that, I was like, yeah, honestly, the main thing that I think keeps a woman from living her authentic being as a mother is money. You know,
Yeah.
it's really
Yeah.
the thing. If you had, I would really love to know if you asked women if they had all the money that they needed, how would they mother? How would they do things? And
Mm.
another thing that I'm thinking of is, which we talked about earlier already, is just having a therapist, a coach. I really think every mother should have in the first year of their child's life, and probably even longer. I can just speak about the first year because that's how much I've done. Have a coach and go through the triggers. Like I had a moment where I reflected on, so I would say I'm never annoyed of my child, but I went through a phase where I would get annoyed of him when he was whining a lot, when he was like not sleeping well or whatever. Like I'm not even annoyed at him when he wakes me up multiple times at night. I don't get annoyed at that, but I noticed myself feeling this annoyance, this agitation when I hear him whine a lot. And again went into inner child healing and just realized like there's just a part of me that was not held in this way. And what is it when they
Mm.
cry a lot? It's just they can't, whatever's going through them, whatever is hurting them emotionally or physically, they just can't hold that by themselves right now, even if it's just being in the car seat and they don't want to be in the car seat. They want to move around, which seems, as an adult, seems like, oh, come on, just get over it.
Yeah.
But for them, it's in the moment because they can't hold their own emotions yet. It feels like life or death. It's like, I don't want to be here. I want to move around. I'm restricted. And then they get into the cycle of tantrums in a way. And
Mm.
after I was able to give my inner child that and have realized that I needed parents that were just completely there and that were really seeing me, that were open to dive into my world and not just having me tag along, I haven't been annoyed at him whining at all. I've been overwhelmed maybe at
Mm.
times when I always have a little baby on me when he just got vaccinated or he's ill or whatever. But there's not this judgment. And I think
Mm.
that's why it's so important. Like anything that triggers you and your child, that's your own shit. Like your child is
Yeah.
not the problem, never. The child is never the issue. The same way, just because my dog's on me right now, same way that dogs are never the issue either. It's the owner. They are like our other babies. So they are the other
Yeah.
babies that we raise, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, So it's like they always say, right, when your dog, and my dog barks, so I'm not the perfect owner either, but they say if your dog barks all the time, or then they don't trust you to protect the house. They think you
Mm.
can't do it. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? Same thing.
Yeah. Same thing. All right. Um, so do you have any more thoughts to before we close? or anything else that you feel like is missing?
Mm. Yeah, I'm just still thinking about your question of a world where mothers were honored, because I think I think it's a good question that probably has much more to say about it. Mm, let me just think quickly. Yeah, so again, I'm thinking work-wise. Mm, I think a lot of mothers struggle with loneliness, so just having more community. And then
Yeah.
also health wise, being supported health wise as a mother. I feel like when you're pregnant, I saw this article once where they said something like, when you're pregnant, you're like this, like this bonbon. How do you say that in
Hmm.
English? Bonbon.
Yeah.
And everyone is like
Candy.
treating it like this crazy candy, and oh, like she needs to go have her blood checked all the time, and she needs to stay healthy and all these things. And then as soon as you pop the baby out, it's like you're just the wrapping paper that can be thrown away now. And there's a lot of
I
truth.
was like, what are you talking about with the candy?
I found that I really found that such a good metaphor for how you can sometimes
Yeah.
feel as a woman. And mm,
Yeah.
it really is like that. Like maybe you have a midwife who checks on you in the beginning, but as soon as the baby's out, it's all about the baby. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be about the baby, but it should be about the baby and the mother. I'm reading a
Yeah.
book about pelvic floor health, and how important it is to strengthen your pelvic muscles and all these things. And you do in Germany, you get one course for strengthening your pelvic floor, and then you're on your own. And I can say my pelvic floor isn't strong right now. I paid 300
Mm.
pounds now for another course that I'm doing that not every woman can afford, that hopefully is going to
Yeah.
make things better. But also, what I learned through that, which is again something where I think women are overlooked in general, because no one teaches you that in your postpartum course, is that actually for a lot of women it doesn't help to do your Kegel exercises, because a lot of women have parts in their pelvis floor that is actually numb and that they don't even know how to use. You can't strengthen a muscle if you don't know how to use it. So even
Mm.
if you pull in your pelvis floor, you might only use up 30% of your pelvis floor, which then again strengthens the muscles unevenly and stuff. So there's a whole part of like actually getting in there and massaging those muscles, activating them, and all these things. And that's another thing that I feel like is completely overlooked. And that's just one example. Like the female
Yeah.
body is so complex, and it is a lot on the female body to have a child in you, to birth a child, whether that's vaginally or through a C-section. And there's just, I think, again, there could be so much more support also mentally. There's so many women who struggle from postpartum depression, even sometimes years. Like it doesn't even need to be in the first year of your baby's life. For a lot of women, it comes actually in the second year when they have to go back to work and they have to do it all at the same
Mm.
time. And then also I think a part of valuing the woman, it's just one more thought that I have, mothers, is supporting the fathers as well. Supporting, if you want
Mm.
to support a mother, you need to support the family. um
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot to that as well.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I mean, there are so many answers now that actually also shape our culture and how, you could take that and make it very practical. And I think it's so important to have to ask these questions and to think about these questions that go beyond just our life, and still, the work that you do as a coach, but also how you mother and show up and you share how, like, what you are going through even on your podcast is also already influencing so much of how can we think about these things. And
Mm.
um yeah, I mean, I don't think it's important to have one right answer of, okay, this should be the future, but really just open that up in conversation to pull it in to our awareness right now, where we are headed, and
Mhm.
how we lead into that in every decision that we make. And I think,
Yeah.
like, supporting an individual, unique choice in every single situation. Like honoring
Exactly.
everyone's authentic desires and way of doing things is the essence of all of
Ex-
that. Yeah.
Exactly. I feel like there's very little areas as parenthood where everyone seems to have an opinion, whether that's
Yeah.
during pregnancy or whether that's how you parent. And I catch myself in it as well, but I feel like I've gotten much better at just being like every mother is different because every person is, every woman is different. And I
Mm.
also do believe, going back to the soul's journey, I also do believe we choose our parents that we want to
Yeah.
have our life with. And I think we choose the lessons we're going to have in this life, and we ultimately grow with our parents as well. I mean, if you needed to
Mm.
be a perfect parent before you have a child, no one would have a child ever. Because we're always evolving, we're always growing. I'm probably gonna mother very differently with this child than I would mother with a child that I have in 3, 6 years.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that's something that Gabor Mate talks about as well, where he says like every child has a different uh experience growing up with because their
Mm.
parents are at a different life. And I think a big part, and that's the last one I want to say, I think a big part for the child to grow up in a most nurturing and most beneficial way is also for the parents to be happy, whether that's them being as a couple happy or them being apart but still respecting and valuing each other. I know that that's in like systematic family in family systems, that's a really huge deal, that
Yeah.
your partner should not be overlooked. Like you still need to value your partner, and your child should not take up the space of the partner. And I know
Yeah.
how it can be. You love your child so much, you want to cuddle with them all night long, but do you still make room for the relationship with your partner as well? Because you and your partner is what's the base of this family and what strengthens the family. If you're together or not, there needs to be this respect and this honoring that your child is only here because your partner was here first. And I think that's can be something that can be forgotten as well in the first year or
Mm.
the other years of parenthood. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
all of these insights and all of these different topics. I will close again with two questions, and the first one is but these are easy.
That's okay.
I mean, the first one is a little bit difficult, but what do you see as your role in bringing this desired reality in when we talk about all of the things that we see in the future and that we desire for the future when it
Mm.
comes to motherhood and beyond? I'm not just talking about this one topic.
I feel like my role in it is, on one hand, just being an inspiration, hopefully, in just learning more and more with every stage of life to connect more to my authentic being, my authentic desires, healing my inner child, letting go of fears that keep me small and keep me from following love ultimately. And through
Mm,
that, hopefully encouraging other people to do the same, or just encouraging other people to, yeah, to follow their heart, whatever that looks like. So that's one part. And that's what I hope my podcast is helping people with, because I really just share about my own experience there. And wrap it up in advice. And then the second question is how I help people, right? Or what was that?
yeah, how you guide and support and help other
How
people
I
in your
so
work.
so how I guide and support, it's basically doing with other people what I have done so much in my own life, and what I still go for help with to my hypnotherapist if I need that extra support, is just healing the inner child, healing shadows. So anything that you feel like keeps you, anything that you feel like you're ashamed of, anything that you feel like pushes you to do something just because you're afraid of doing something else. So just to go back
Mm,
to the work example, right? Instead of following instead of starting your own business or writing a book, something that really lights up your heart, you think it would be lazy to quit your job because, or it would be dumb to quit your job, or it would be irrational or something, anything that all the reasons why you think you can't do the thing that really lights up your heart are ultimately shadows that keep you small. And it's so hard to explain it when you haven't done it. But as soon as you've done the shadow work, it just becomes so clear. You're like, oh my God, this is how I held myself small. Let's go for the thing that lights me up. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think, and that's basically it. That's how I support people, and I think it's really important to remember you can listen to all kinds of podcasts and stuff, and I think it helps a lot to uncover your patterns and all these things, but to some of them to really really heal them, when it's not just something that you need to realize and then you can do it different, it just really helps to have someone else support you and to guide you through this process, especially on a subconscious level.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having
And
me.
yeah, you're welcome. Until next time.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation and listening until the end. Maybe you also want to share what your thoughts are on what a society would look like that would really value mothers and motherhood, and what you think is needed to bring about that change. And maybe you also want to share how a culture would think about mothers that would really allow this change to happen. What I really loved about this episode is that redefining reality is not something we can say with certainty. It is not about finding that one perfect solution, but really inviting in those contemplations and reflections of what we desire to see and what we create with the actions that we take today. What is interesting to me is that I feel the shifts in our collective consciousness happening already, and I can feel where the energy is leading, and at the same time I believe that we can lead into that future right now, and we are the ones really defining the reality that we live in and that we move into. And another point that I found fascinating, that really sank in while we were recording this episode, is that the work that we do is incredible because we are breaking out of limiting beliefs that a culture has imprinted on us while we are still living within that culture. And at the same time, when I look around, as soon as I have broken out of a limiting belief, it does not really affect my personal reality, even if I see other people still holding on to those limiting beliefs and shaping their life around those limitations. For me, they are not relevant anymore when I have broken out of them. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. When we go through the subconscious work and we contemplate these things and we work on all of these different emotional and energetic levels to create our own reality, even if we are still living within a culture that makes it difficult, we can already change from the inside out. So for me, that is the most mesmerizing part of it, that it is not either or, it is always and it is in the contradiction and in the duality of life where we find our purpose and our agency and how we want to move with life and with the flow of life and in uncertainty, while we also really take into consideration the power that we already hold in shaping and influencing the world around us. So, if you want to connect with Nora on a deeper level, I invite you to listen to her podcast, the Deep Rooted Self-Love Podcast with Nora Ring. You can find it where you are listening to this podcast right now. And if you want to dive deeper into my work, you can find me on Instagram at tabeazoe, or you can find the Instagram from the podcast, beyondthehorizon.pod. And you can go to my website, thecreativewaters.com, and find a whole world of mystical philosophy and energetic mastery that I am offering to you. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you very soon. Bye.